name is Ken Adams, and I'll be your host for this edition of the Militia News Network. The nation is swelling with militia activity, and it's been reported that 25% of the nation's counties now have militia members. The militia movement is now said to be the fastest growing organization in the country. The national membership is now estimated at over 150,000 and growing by thousands daily. The state of Michigan is now over 12,000 strong, with brigades in 70 of its 83 counties. The residents of Michigan seem to be most excited about militia activities in their state. Well, most of them anyhow. Michigan resident Tom Washington, who is also the president of the NRA, does not seem to see where the militia gets its authority. Maybe he needs to ask the thousands of NRA members that are in the militia. Tom Washington recently appeared on public television making what appeared to be very uninformed statements about the militia, the Constitution of the United States, and American history. When we return, we'll be joined by General Norm Olson, commander of the Michigan Militia, and hear his comments regarding Tom Washington's public TV appearance.
Tom, in your role as National Rifle Association president, you've mentioned that there's a new trend happening across the nation that has you concerned. Private militias joining together. You've been in touch with some of them. Tell me something about that. This is a fairly new phenomenon, and it's something that does bear looking into.
Well, the militia movement is sweeping the nation, quite frankly, and it's getting stronger here in Michigan. The latest I heard was there had been some kind of citizen militia form in some 60-plus counties out of our 83 counties in this state. I'm not certain where these people get their authority. They say that they have an authority which transcends our common law today and our Constitution, both state and federal. In fact, the leader of the Michigan militia told me that they drew their authority all the way back from something called the Constitution of Natural Law. But a lot of them point to the Second Amendment, where it says a well-regulated militia is necessary, that gives them the right to have a militia. I would suggest that if one looks at the Constitution under the context of the times it was written, they will quickly recognize that we lived under a monarch. And that one of the very reasons for having a constitution was to create a body of law which would allow us to self-govern. And within that self-government, we have a court system. And we have a ballot box, the most powerful thing of all, and probably the greatest freedom that American people have. And so I have said to them, you know, I don't believe you've exercised those things which are provided for you in the Constitution to correct whatever ills it is you perceive that we have in the government. Number one, the ballot box. Vote the rascals out. Less than half the people are even registered to vote, let alone vote. We have a president sitting right now that's in there on 43% of the people that went to the polls to vote. You've got 9.5 million people living in Michigan, and you'll be lucky to get 3 million of them out to vote next week. You know, hundreds of thousands of people, young men and women throughout our history have lost their lives, have spilled their blood to guarantee our people have this right to vote. And yet we ignore it. For me, it's an insult. That's an insult.
Okay, now, what is it about the private militias that you find troubling?
Well, they haven't broken any laws that I'm able to identify. I think that they've been orderly and so on. But as I listen to them, and I can't help but recognize the potential for some bad things to happen. And if they were to get a charismatic leader, it's hard to say what might happen. Somebody that they would follow into the very gates of hell, it's hard to determine. And I just believe that that's wrong. I fail to see where that authority is provided in either the state or the federal Constitution. And besides that, if they have the authority, why can't you organize one and create your own generals and admirals and whatever the case may be? You know, they've got regimental numbers, they've got brigade numbers, they've got insignia, and the whole 9 yards. And they're becoming very sophisticated.
This sounds like a gun control proponent's nightmare. a very good reason to control things like assault rifles. Where do you draw the line
well,
there between...
I don't buy into that particular argument because I believe so fervently and so strongly in the Constitution itself and in the power of the American people to have the kind of government that they want if they'll only exercise that power. My God, do you realize that there are people all over this world that stand in line, that walk miles and miles, that are just crying out for an opportunity to vote, and we just so cavalierly just pass it off, you know?
I know, it's a shame.
It is. It's shameful.
Do you believe this is the militias that are forming are similar to what happened in Waco? Although that was a religious...
Well, you see, and that's an extreme case, but certainly they start these marches and they get these assemblies. You know, there were several thousand of them that assembled down in Lansing, and to their credit, they were very peaceful. To their credit, they were very peaceful.
The Lansing State Journal said that when Mayor raised the United Nations flag, that there could have been a big fight, but they took the flag down, and normally it flies the entire day. That
was just the other day. I personally spoke to Mayor Hollister. I ran into him at a social function that evening, and he told me that he was frightened by that. Now, that doggone it is not right. And there's no reason why the mayor of that city should feel threatened by those people, but he felt threatened. He was grossly intimidated.
He took the flag down.
That's exactly right. And this is something, incidentally, I don't know if you knew this or not, they've been doing it for 15 years. Yeah. It's sanctioned by the veterans of foreign wars and done according to their protocol. It's incredible.
As promised, we have General Norm Olson, commander of the Michigan Militia, with us. And General, glad you could be with us today.
Thank you, Ken.
Gee, he had a lot to say about the militia, and he mentioned that he didn't see where the militia got any authority from. He mentioned the Second Amendment of the Constitution, same place that I assume that the NRA gets their rights to keep and bear arms, but he didn't see anything there about the militia. What's your comments to that?
Well, he's fundamentally, he's correct. The Constitution of the United States grants no freedoms, grants no rights to the people of the United States to do anything. The Constitution of the United States is a contract between the people, who remain the principals in any contract, and the agents or the servants, which is the government. The Constitution then is a reign of control upon the government. It establishes the framework, the limits of its power, and grants it certain authority to do those things which will provide the life and the liberty, the safekeeping, those freedoms, and the protection, the defense of the people. If the government fails in its responsibilities to defend the people, that does not mean that defense is lost. It simply means that the defense of the society will defer back to the people in whose power that power has always been vested. In other words, the people, no matter if we're talking about a tribe or a clan or a village or a town, the people have always risen up and taken matters into their own hands when it became a matter of defense. And you can go back into antiquity. You can go back to the braves in a small Indian village, for example, or you might think about the colonial Minutemen before the Constitution was even thought of. There were people who got together who defended themselves. So when we talk about the Constitution as being the granting power to form a militia, that's not completely correct. What it means is that the Constitution recognizes that the government may have the authority or the right to establish a defensive unit, and that can be called the militia. The government, what the Constitution does do, in fact, is echo the reality that the power to defend oneself has been granted to the individual in those things which we call the Bill of Rights, which are inalienable. They can never be changed. So fundamentally, Tom Washington's question, does the Constitution grant power to form a militia? No, it doesn't. In fact, I don't believe that we've ever claimed that the Constitution ever grants the authority to form a militia. The Constitution does not grant authority to do anything. The Constitution simply echoes authorities already granted as inalienable, Ken.
Okay, then if I understand you correctly, then what you're saying is that we have always had the right to defend ourselves and to form militias for that defense of ourselves, our neighbors, our state, and our country.
Yes, sir, Ken. In fact, this is so fundamental. Now, if we really think about it, the idea is simple, but it's very profound. When we talk about the right to keep and bear arms, we sometimes fail when we put the Constitution into this argument. If we argue from a constitutional basis, then how do we answer the question that's given, what did people do to defend themselves before the Constitution? This thought is so profound that it will establish our thinking and make it very clear that the right to keep and bear arms, the right to defend oneself, is natural to all societal creatures, to all human beings who live in groups. We will come together to defend ourselves, whether it's against wild animals or bandits or marauding tribes, whatever. We will defend ourselves. And the right to keep and bear arms is fundamental. The right to form a defensive unit, that also is fundamental. Militias, however, created by the state, are also a limited right granted to the state for the defense of the state. But that granting of that power must come from authority greater than that granted power, from the granting power, and that being the people, that power vested in the people forever.
Okay, so then really what the Constitution is doing then is guaranteeing and protecting the rights that you already have and limiting the government from taking those rights away.
Absolutely, absolutely. The government needs to be reined back. All of the framers of the Constitution understood the danger, that there was a very real danger that the government one day would usurp the authority, would overwhelm that granting power, being the people, being the principals in this contract, and would indeed become the masters or the principals. And if that were to happen, then our whole form of government, of course, would cease from being. In fact, it's interesting too that should the servant or the agent in this contract usurp that authority, then the contract is broken by default. And if that were to happen, then the granting authority, that being the people or the principals or the masters, would have no obligation to abide by that contract anymore, and they could in fact dissolve government.
Okay, so then I guess then when Tom Washington was mentioning about the Constitution of natural law, this is kind of what you're getting back to, what you're alluding to there, is that we've always had those rights, and that's where that Constitution of natural law comes in?
Yes, Ken. When I talked to Tom Washington on the phone, and I told him again that there was a Constitution that transcends that document which we call the United States Constitution, understanding too that the Constitution is a contract. When do you make contracts? Well, when you have a job to do, or an objective to reach, or a mission to fulfill. The mission was to create a government. Only free people can create a government. Only well-armed people who have already secured liberty for themselves by the use of arms would be willing, yea, would even be courageous enough to form a government. There's a natural law. Let me speak about that natural law. If we look back into antiquity once again, we may use words that Jesus spoke when he said to love your neighbors as yourself. Is that not a contract that we make between ourselves and our neighbors? Now, I believe it is. I believe that a contract that we make with our neighbors to defend them, to watch over them, to watch for their children's safety and to watch for their safety, and to not do anything that would endanger our neighbors, I believe that that is about as natural of a constitution that you can get. If we're talking about a contract, then my contract with you, Ken, is to watch over your well-being and your safety, to defend you and your family, and to help you to defend yourself. And so when we look at natural law, the law that God would have us to watch over one another, we're looking at a contract or a constitution, if you will. That's what I was talking to him about. That concept seemed to elude him, and that's so unfortunate.
Well, something that I didn't really understand, and maybe you can enlighten me on what he may have been talking about, when he was talking about at the time that the Constitution was written, that it really doesn't mean the same thing anymore. And he was talking about the Second Amendment, and it really puzzled me because it's that same Second Amendment that he defends the right to keep and bear arms. The prior part of that same sentence, it's not even a different sentence, there's a comma in the middle of the sentence after militia, and then goes into the right to keep and bear arms, and he was saying that we had to understand that when the Constitution was written, that we were under a monarch. And can you elaborate on that, what he was talking about?
No, in fact, in his conversation with me, he said that. In his conversation with Joel Kurth, the writer from the St. Ignace News, he also spoke to Joel Kurth and said that very same thing. And then, surprisingly, on television, without ever checking a history book, he once again said that the Constitution was written under the rule of a monarch. It was the monarchy, it was that whole vestige of monarchy that had to be removed before the people could again bravely and courageously even form something called government. They were so afraid, in fact, of a monarchy that they set aside the idea of establishing a king. They didn't even like the ideal of parliament. They needed a government with checks and balances so firmly implanted in it that nothing like a monarchy could emerge. Now, I don't know what Tom Washington is talking about. Certainly he's not ignorant of history, and certainly he's not foolish enough to even to believe that there was a monarchy in place. You'll have to ask Mr. Washington on that one, Ken. I still don't know what he meant, and I don't know where he got that from. And that's surprising.
Okay, well, it's surprising to me as well. It just seemed very unusual the way that he commented on the Constitution, and especially the Second Amendment. I guess that's what we will have to do, is once again ask Mr. Washington where his point of view is on the Second Amendment, I suppose. Certainly the NRA has had a long-standing commitment to defending that amendment in the Constitution, and they certainly have always had a long-standing way of agreeing with it, but it seemed that in some ways that Tom Washington didn't believe that the Second Amendment stood for anything anymore. To move on, he also mentioned something else that he didn't elaborate on, but that the militia was involved in something that to him sounded like it was sinister in Lansing. He said thousands of people showed up there. What took place in Lansing that had him so concerned?
Well, go back just a little bit. First of all, there was the grassroots rally, and thousands of gun owners arrived in Lansing to protest the crime bill and to protest the assault weapons ban, to speak their mind concerning the right to keep and bear arms. And thousands of freedom-loving Americans showed up, and they demonstrated quite clearly what their thoughts were concerning the weapons ban. A few weeks later, another rally was called in Lansing. It seems that on UN Day, the United Nations flag would once again be raised over the Capitol. Excuse me, not the Capitol, but the City Hall building across from the Capitol. Mayor Hollister officiated there at that celebration when the UN flag was raised, and the militia showed up. I called for the militia from Michigan to arrive there with flags of their own, the ones that really mattered, America's true colors, red, white, and blue. And we called it America's True Colors Day. And between 300 and 400, perhaps more, flag-bearing, flag-waving Americans showed up there at the City Hall to protest as the United Nations flag was once again raised, as it had been for 15 years. Now, here's something very amusing. In Tom Washington's statements on the CMU public television, being interviewed by the editors of the newspapers here in Michigan, he became a little bit animate when he criticized the militia for making the mayor of Lansing fearful. Now, I won't try to mimic Tom Washington. You can look at the tape. But he accused us of making the mayor fearful for doing that. Now, when I heard that, I was a little bit taken back. I suppose that if Thomas Jefferson were sitting next to me, he would say, go for it. Make the mayor fearful. Anyone who raises the United Nations flag over the sovereign soil of Michigan, anybody who dares to raise the symbol of an empire government, the United Nations, over the sovereign soil of Michigan or the United States of America needs to be afraid, needs to be afraid. And not only that, but I believe that when Jefferson said that when the people fear the government, there is tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there is liberty. Now, again, I don't know what history books Tom Washington is reading, but whatever book told him that there was a monarchy in place when the Constitution was written may also have expunged that history book of those wonderful words of Thomas Jefferson. And I believe that government officials need to be made afraid, and they need to be defensive and on guard, lest they let slip through their fingers this precious thing we call liberty. And along with that, the sovereignty of our nation and of our state also can.
Well, I understand that you called the militia troops to be there with their flag. What was your purpose? What did you hope to accomplish by having these men come with their flags and be there on this day?
That's a good question. The whole idea between the demonstrations and the activities of the militia are not to sow seeds of fear. Now, that is not our objective. Please understand that. Our objective is to so emphasize what I call the common elements of unity. If we can emphasize the goodness of America, the bravery and the courage of American soldiers and patriots down through the years, if we can emphasize the goodness, the righteousness, the justice, the love that America has for this world and what we've done for nations throughout this world, if we can emphasize those common elements of unity, then those who are the defenders of those common elements will rise up. They will feel stronger and more encouraged. And along with that, as the true inheritors of liberty, the true patriots of the United States, if we will raise up, then think about this. Those who are the enemy, the opposition, those who would destroy those liberties and freedoms, then they will, by the very nature of who we are, they will become who they are. They will feel defensive. They will feel fear and anger. The flag, the United States flag, we thought that if we would show up with hundreds and hundreds of flags flying in the breeze, that we would send such a strong message to patriots across this nation that we have a flag that means something. Our flag is the red, white, and blue. And anyone who knows can see the color there. The red signifies the blood. To me, the blood of courageous and brave Americans who have given the last full measure for liberty and freedom. The United Nations flag is nothing more than a piece of cloth, and blue and white with a picture of the globe. To me, it signifies little. To me, it shows confusion. To me, it's a symbol of, again, of a world government bent on total domination. I'm going to stick to the red, white, and blue, Ken. I'm going to stick to the colors that really mean something to me, and I know something means something to the people in America.
So then it appears to me that if the mayor had anything to fear, it was not the militia, but it was to fear that the people would find out what he was doing, the tyrant that he is, in recognizing and embracing a foreign government on our sovereign soil of Michigan. Is that correct?
Absolutely. If 500 people show up on your doorstep and they are espousing positive principles, and if you've been a rascal and have been mixed up in doing something that is wrong, you ought not sleep well that night. And so the fear, yes, the fear may be the cold, hard reality of what you are doing. If Mr. Hollister feels that he is un-American or lacking patriotism with regard to the United States flag, then so be it. I believe that any mayor, especially of a principal city, a significant city such as Lansing, any mayor ought to fight in every possible way to prevent any other flag than the United States flag or the flag of this sovereign state to be flown in that city anywhere on public soil. It's appalling to me that he even allowed it. It's appalling to me that even when Tom Washington said something to the effect that the VFW, or the American Legion, had recognized and had given its stamp of approval to this activity, I'm not sure that is altogether true. And I believe that perhaps Mr. Washington was saying something to the effect that they were following the proper custom of flying a flag below the United States flag. And in such case, what they did with the United Nations flag was true. But I can't believe that the American Legion or any other veterans of foreign war organization would feel good and comfortable about allowing the United Nations flag to fly over sovereign soil of the United States of America. I can't believe that.
Well, it certainly made an impact, as the news piece that we're going to see in a few minutes, that the whole nation saw what took place in Lansing. It certainly seems that the people felt the same way you did, because as I understand that the flag did come down, and that, as the news piece says, that the militia was victorious in what they had to accomplish that day was accomplished. And as a matter of fact, I think the words were "mission accomplished" at the end of the piece. So with that said, I want to thank you for being here today, General.
Thank you.
And let's take a look at what CNN had to say about the True Colors Day.
Fine, thank you.
In front of the Lansing, Michigan City Hall to protest, of all things, United Nations Day. Ed Garston explains.
Resolute high school band members and nervous color guards struggle to keep their composure as they march into a shouting, chanting wall of competition in camouflage, opposed to the raising of the UN flag to commemorate United Nations Day.
You're a traitor and you'll burn in hell!
If we saw the Russian flag up there instead of that beautiful pink powder blue flag, then maybe our country would wake up.
The UN started out with a good idea, but now it stands for socialism. We pay 75% of the tab and get one vote. We support the rest of the world, they turn on us.
The noisy rebukes come from a group known as the Michigan Militia, a tightly allied group of paramilitary divisions, as they're known, based in 66 of Michigan's 83 counties. They're opposed to government intrusion into people's lives and base their authority on the Second Amendment that says a well-regulated militia is necessary to maintain a free state and gives people the right to keep and bear arms.
Like they say, the Second Amendment ain't about duck hunting. The Second Amendment is about maintaining the sovereignty of the individual.
When Hitler took over power, they took all the people's guns away from them.
There are believed to be about 100,000 militia members nationwide. He says there's no need for alarm.
There's nothing sinister about it. It doesn't have anything to do with revolution. I mean, after all, why would we want to overthrow ourselves? It's the government of the people, right?
In the end, the phalanx and fatigues win out. The UN flag is taken down after a few minutes. The U.S. flag flies alone. Then they all go home. Mission accomplished.
If you had been there, you would have seen a sea of red, white, and blue. And yes, it was a great victory for the militia, but even a greater victory for the people. It had been intended for the UN flag to fly all day, but within 20 minutes after the raising of the UN flag, calls to the governor's and mayor's office forced the flag to the ground. The national spotlight has been on the militia for several weeks now, and was even a topic on the Dr. Jack Van Impe program. Dr. Van Impe also talks about prison camps in several states.
Presenting Dr. and Mrs. Jack Van Impe, a news team analyzing and evaluating world events, having traveled to 50 nations, interviewing 150 leaders globally. This team is qualified to report and interpret international news.
Well, we're going to talk about something that is quite surprising. It is the citizen militia's rise in state, and it's talking about Michigan. Norman Olson swears in new members of the Northern Michigan Regional Militia at a Sheboygan County training session. Now, you want to say something about this picture, don't you?
Our local ABC station featured this the last 2 nights. These men, militiamen, are now in 65 of our 83 counties seeking recruits, and they're joining. We're told by ABC that they could be radicals, but relevance researchers, which fed me a lot of this information, said these are good people, religious people. They are not skinheads, not neo-Nazis, not Klansmen, not white supremacists, but people who care about the Constitution of the United States and their country.
All right, I'd like for our people to see a map right now of the United States. And some of the markings that you see indicate United Nations combat groups' confirmed locations, and another would indicate the internment camps that have been confirmed also.
And Rexella, the thing is, this is why these militiamen are concerned as to what may happen in the next 24 to 36 months because of these bases all throughout the country.
I'm going to be quoting now from Senator Sam Nunn on planned joint United States-Russian military maneuvers in the United States, and this is from the New York Times, June 1st, 1994. He said, "I think our American people will welcome a Russian military force for peacekeeping purposes." Now, I'm going to be quoting from that source that Jack mentioned a moment ago, the Relevance Research source. The estimates of foreign troops range from mere handfuls of men scattered across a few bases for routine specialty training to wild reports of combat battle groups concealed inside our national parks or in vital underground cities throughout the nation, and totaling up to 500,000 men. That's a little scary. Motorists in several states have photographed trainloads of military armed equipment being transported on our roads and by rail. We contacted spokesmen from several United States bases who have confirmed to Relevance, that's this paper, that foreign military personnel, in some cases up to battalion strength, have recently trained in such bases as Fort Polk in Louisiana, Fort Lewis in the state of Washington, and Fort Benning in Georgia. Now, there are 3 bases right now, Jack, where they are actually training 500,000
right.
men.
And they have actually taken photographs of these UN Army personnel in Saucier, Mississippi, in Gulfport, Mississippi, in New Orleans, Louisiana, in western Texas, where they saw 100 rail cars with UN equipment and many Russian tanks, right here in Michigan. And there's reason for concern. And what's so unbelievable about this is that the Gorbachev Foundation has been behind a lot of this establishing of UN soldiers in closed bases that our nation shut down. And you know, President John F. Kennedy was alarmed over what might happen in the future. Listen to this. He said, "The high office of the president has been used to foment a plot to destroy America's freedom. And before I leave office, I must inform the citizens of their plight." He was assassinated 10 days later. And what was it that so burdened him? Order number 11490, giving the President of the United States the powers of a dictator over the finances, economy, over political life, and over the military. It has since been passed. Our President could now do that. Not only that, but our President signed Presidential Decree number 25, giving the head of the UN forces power over our U.S. Army. It's all here, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming to pass.
This past weekend has been a training weekend in Michigan. 3 days of intense training at the state training facility, Fort George William, in Brutus, Michigan. As you can see in the following clip, the Michigan militia is serious about the protection of their state and this country.
And guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet. Citizen soldiers, where have you been? Citizen soldiers, where have you been? I've been to Gettysburg. I've been to Gettysburg. I've been to Antietam. I've been to Antietam. One more battle to fight. One more battle to fight. There you go.
men. It is now time to rally on the company street.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations also. This is what it's all about, folks. Now we're out here, okay? We can run the confidence course. We can do these physical things. But let me say this man here, 81 years old, and the 87-year-old woman that we enlisted 2 weeks ago, who wanted to be a part of the militia movement, they are the spirit of what this is all about.
Amen.
Amen. This is, listen, folks, these are the folks that have gone on before.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great. These are the ones who have blazed the trail before us and who have stood by the stuff. And now it's our turn. And lest we forget these people, we must keep them ever close to us and embrace them. Yeah. Also, we have a couple youngsters here, right, today?
Yep.
Bring those youngsters up, those teenagers, would you please? I'd like to shake your hand. Hard. I want you to stand next to Otto here. Put one on each side. One on each side over here. Okay. Got some more teenagers here. Stand here with this. Stand here with this gentleman. Come on, stand on the back. I want the cameras to get a good shot of this. This is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. How old are you? 10? 81 years old. Now, if my math still serves, it's 71 years difference. So 71 years of American standing. That's wonderful. And so again, praise the Lord.
Hey, General.
Amen.
Yes.
God
bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the valleys to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Hey.
The CBS News team spent this weekend with the militia also, and will be airing a special on the CBS This Morning program very soon. Thank you for being with us for this edition of the Militia News Network, and until we meet again, Godspeed to all of you.
The American dream has become a nightmare. Signs of the time are on cardboard on corners in town. There's a cancer called crime in our cities and an unspoken fear. We're on our way down. We must take America back, put an end to the gangs and the drugs and the streets, and the fact that the bad guys most always go free. That is wrong. We need leaders who lead us, not stick us and bleed us and take all our money and send it abroad. We must take America back. We need prayer in the schools and more things made in USA. It's the least we can do for the red, white, and blue. We must take America back. It's a hell here on earth in some city schoolyards. When bullets and birth control outnumber books, something's wrong. There's a hunger for good news and heroes, But good news is no news, so all of the heroes are gone. We must take